Hey everybody, welcome to my very basic guide. In this episode, we'll be learning about how mind over matter can be combined with the principles of might makes right. Sometimes a person can feel constrained in all of the steel and brawn that traditionally define a martial character, but they can still appreciate the pragmatic effectiveness of being good with the blade and wearing armor for your wide forehead in order to protect your precious neurons. Have you ever felt that your brain matter is wasted on the more menial tasks of being a classic fighter and wanted something fancier and more subtle than eldritch magic? Then perhaps becoming a Psi Warrior is your best bet. The Psi Warrior is a fighter martial archetype that allows the player to augment what the fighter already does and make it more brainy with effects that are essentially magical buffs to your adventuring life, giving you that sense of superiority. This subclass offers quite a lot to players who want a little something extra from their tanky frontliner, giving a really healthy selection of tricks and psychic shenanigans that are incredibly useful, while also not forcing the player to have to sacrifice anything, as all of the psionic options are always available to you. The ability to draw on the powers of the awakened mind in order to do a variety of superhuman tasks while also not having to delve into the complexities of intricate spell lists or maneuvers can be especially appealing for those that enjoy having their options open at all times, and also for newer players who want to freely experiment with all of the newfound powers at their disposal. But magical brain spells cannot be created from nothing. Like most other forms of witchcraft, it requires a fuel source or a mana pool. In this case, a Psi Warrior's abilities are fed with their psionic power, a level 3 feature. Like most other adventurers who spec into having a wrinkly brain surface, your ability to manifest psychic energies into the material plane is determined by dice that represent the total amount of psionic power that you can expend. For a Psi Warrior, it is the number of psionic energy dice you have that are equal to 2 times your proficiency bonus, and they start off as a d6 at 3rd level, transforming into a D8 at 5th level, a D10 at 11th level, and a D12 at level 17. Your big psionic brain will eventually grow tired from expending all that psionic energy dice, and the best way for your mind to recharge is to relax during a long rest. However, if you desire true overclocking potential of your nerve cells, then you can also use your bonus action to regain a single psionic energy die. You can't do this bonus action again until you finish a short or long rest. Now, with all of that out of the way, we move on to the actual psionic superpowers that are the main consumers of your psionic energy dice, starting off with Protective Field. This ability is a defensive telekinetic shield that helps you and your allies that are within 30 feet of you take less damage. You activate Protective Field using your reaction when somebody you see gets hit by an attack, and then are able to mitigate the damage taken by expending 1 psionic energy dice, and using the number rolled plus your intelligence modifier to subtract from the incoming damage roll. Using your reaction to help block some or all of the damage from an attack is a pretty great ability to have, and can help sustain your party throughout a lot of tough battles. It might also be enough to reduce the damage to 0, in which case the Psi Warrior can save spellcasters from having to roll concentration checks, which is very valuable. Obviously, using your reaction means that enemies can just walk away from you, but having the choice of damage reduction in a precarious situation can be life-saving, and it's a big reason why an effective Psi Warrior has to budget their psionic energy dice accordingly. The next psionic ability is an offensive usage of your psychic powers, boosting your damage output by enhancing your weapon attacks with an extra telekinetic punch. After you hit a target within 30 feet of you, the Psi Warrior can roll 1 psionic energy die and add the result with their intelligence modifier. The total amount will be equal to the amount of force damage that is applied to the original target of the weapon attack, but you can only use Psionic Strike once on your own turn. Psionic Strike is unique in the sense that it creates a secondary source of force damage right after the initial weapon attack, which is good against enemy spellcasters because they now have to roll 2 saving throws to maintain their concentration, although it does mean that critical hits do not double the Psionic Strike damage. Psionic Strike is also compatible for ranged fighter builds since it doesn't require a melee weapon to be used, so that is nice for people who want to be some sort of psionic archer. But ultimately, Psionic Strike's extra bump in damage is probably not something you want to utilize too much, since early on you do not really have that big of a pool of resources to use, and it's a relatively modest increase in damage. Moving on to the final psionic ability that the Psi Warrior obtains at level 3, it is known as Telekinetic Movement. It is basically an improvement in your capacity to move things around using nothing but brain juice. You can use an action to target a loose object that is large or smaller, or a single creature that is willing to be tossed around like a ragdoll. The target of your telekinetic movement also has to be visible and within 30 feet. If it meets those parameters, then you get to move it up to 30 feet to an empty space that you can see. If the object that you are telekinetically moving is tiny in size, then you can move it to or from your hand at any time. Telekinetic movement is a psionic power that is free of charge for the first time, and then every subsequent telekinetic movement afterwards will cost you 1 psionic energy die, unless you take a short or long rest, in which case the free telekinetic movement is regained. This is a pretty fascinating ability to think about, as there are potentially really cool applications, such as moving friendly creatures out of harm's way, and because telekinetic movement is movement that doesn't cost the creature any movement speed, it will not provoke attack of opportunities. Other situations where telekinetic movement may come in handy would be when your ally is grappled and needs help getting pulled out, or if one of your friends is stuck in difficult terrain. Other more creative usages might also come in handy, since telekinetic movement allows large objects to be picked up vertically or horizontally, regardless of their weight. It gives the Psi Warrior the chance to drop really heavy objects on the heads of their enemies. The use cases of telekinetic movement are somewhat situational, but the fact that they get the first usage as a freebie is a pretty decent incentive to experiment here and there. After some time beefing up your gray matter, you will eventually reach level 7, at which point you can be considered a telekinetic adept, a feature that gives access to new psionic powers. The first telekinetic adept ability that you receive is known as Psi Powered Leap, giving you frog-like jumps by way of telekinetic propulsion. Using a bonus action, you gain a flying speed equal to 2 times your walking speed until the end of your current turn. Similarly to telekinetic movement, you get 1 Psi Powered Leap use for free every time you finish a short or long rest, and the subsequent usages will cost a psionic energy die each. So the name is a bit of a misnomer, where Psi Powered Leap is actually full-on psionic flight. Even though it only lasts for 1 turn, it's still a really useful psionic power for getting to those hard-to-reach areas, getting on top of fortified walls, or when you need to jump over giant holes in the ground in order to get close enough to enemies so that you can lay the smackdown on them. The other half of Telekinetic Adept is an add-on bonus effect for your Psionic Strike ability, now with extra pushing power in your Telekinetic Thrust. Whenever you successfully deal damage to an enemy using Psionic Strike, you get to also force a strength saving throw against a DC that is equal to 8 plus your proficiency bonus plus your intelligence modifier. If the enemy that took the force damage fails the strength saving throw, then you can choose to knock a target prone or move them up to 10 feet in any direction as long as on the horizontal plane. Having Telekinetic Thrust as a passive buff to your Psionic Strike does make the damage dealing Psionic power a much better option now for you to expend your Psionic Energy dice on, since gaining the potential of shoving an enemy on top of your damage boost does synergize really well with the fighter's innate ability to spam out extra attacks, and potentially gaining that advantage on your follow-up strikes without having to sacrifice damage output in a turn is really nice. However, being able to move an enemy 10 feet in any horizontal direction is also no joke. A normal shove is only 5 feet away from you, so the angle of attack normally matters, but with Telekinetic Thrust it makes pushing people off cliffs or into traps that much easier, as you can push them left or right at any angle, and that's a neat trick to be getting on top of the force damage. Getting to level 10, you realize that a big brain by itself cannot survive the vicious world of D&D without some additional protection. This is when the Psi Warrior gains the Guarded Mind feature. You gain resistance to psychic damage, which is thematically very appropriate, but the better part of the Guarded Mind feature is your newfound ability to expend a single Psionic Energy die to instantly end every source of the charmed or frightened conditions on yourself. While Guarded Mind may seem like a niche feature to be getting, the frighten and charm conditions are actually relatively common among stronger enemy types, and so having the ability to just definitively end its negative influence over your mind is always the kind of thing that is great to have for when those dastardly monsters are up to no good, which is more often than not. Arriving at level 15, you realize that sometimes defense is the best defense, and gain a telekinetic bubble shield called Bulwark of Force. Using your bonus action, you can pick a number of people equal to your intelligence modifier that are within 30 feet of you to be protected by half cover for a 1 minute duration, or until the Psi Warrior is incapacitated. Similar to previous Sonic abilities, Bulwark of Force is free for the first time, and can be replenished on a long rest, or if you choose to expend a Sonic Energy die. Bulwark of Force gives your party members +2 on their armor class and dexterity saving throws, which is a pretty significant buff, especially since this only requires your bonus action, and it's not a concentration spell like Shield of Faith. Half cover on demand for most, if not all, of your team is a really strong ability that helps prevent a lot of damage from both attacks and spells that force a dexterity saving throw, and is most likely worth a singular Psionic Energy die to help stiffen the spines of your less enlightened friends. And finally, after all your trials and psionic tribulations, you reach the capstone feature for the Psi Warrior subclass at level 18, where you can proudly say that you've become a telekinetic master. You really start feeling the brain power rushing into your fingertips, as you can now cast the 5th level spell, Telekinesis, requiring no components, meaning that you do not need to have a free hand to perform the somatic components, which is pretty handy for fighters that have both their hands full of either weapons or shields. While casting or concentrating on Telekinesis, you also have the option of using your bonus action to make a weapon attack, which is a really great thing, since if your Telekinesis goes off on an enemy creature, you get to position them however you like, and it also gives them the restrained condition, giving you advantage on your subsequent weapon attacks against them, meaning your bonus action weapon attack will be given advantage on the same turn you use Telekinesis. Telekinetic Master uses your intelligence as the spellcasting ability, which is usually not good for martial characters, but for the fighter class that gets a ton of ability score improvements over time, it actually is pretty decent, since at level 18, the Psi Warrior probably has a good intelligence modifier. Like previous psionic abilities, the first Telekinetic Master usage is free of charge, and can be regained on a long rest, or by expending a psionic entry die. And I think it goes without saying that using only one psionic entry die for a 5th level spell is a pretty fantastic deal, especially for a spell that is not only aesthetically in sync with what a Psi Warrior should be like, it's also just a really fun spell to utilize and play around with, as it opens up many different avenues of creative shenanigans. And that about does it for this very basic guide on the Psi Warrior martial archetype, as presented in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. The Psi Warrior helps the player embody what a Psionic Knight should feel like without hemming them into any difficult choices. It has a bit of everything, with the ability to apply psionic strikes using ranged weapons, being able to utilize supernatural mobility to jump over great distances, giving the fighter extra defensive power to help sustain your entire party, and perhaps most delightfully, it has a lot of unique telekinetic features that gives the player a larger sandbox to mess around with in a way that is actually feasible and not entirely niche. And as always, I hope that anyone who watches my stuff enjoys what I create as much as I enjoyed creating it in the first place. I'll see you guys next time. Until then, goodbye for now.